when we're ready. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to my second of my guest series of guest question and answer sessions today with Councillor Lisa Mulherin, who is the executive member, and if I get this wrong, Lisa, please correct me, for climate change, transportation and sustainability. I think that's the right title. I may have missed something off there. Just to kind of well, there we go then. So just to confirm quickly how this will work, very much as we did with Hilary Bent a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just doing a bit of housekeeping now. So what will happen is Lisa will have about 5 minutes or so just to say what she would like to say about maybe where we are, maybe some of the big themes that are to be considered in the kind of current timescales we're in. We'll then go to about 20-25 minutes of questions which have been sent in advance. Lisa has had about half a day just to have a quick look at these. And then the second half of the event will be taking questions directly from the live feed for you to ask your questions. So there won't be much time for Lisa to prep, and she might not have the answers, but anything we can't answer, we will get back to you on at a later date. Other than that, that's pretty much the format for the next hour. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lisa for her 5 minutes just to kind of set the scene, and then we'll go into questions. So over to you, Lisa.
So first of all, thank you, Paul, for inviting me to do this. It's the first time I've done a Facebook Live Q&A, so it's a learning experience. I hope it goes well. It's been a bit of a difficult time for us all, obviously, being in lockdown. Had a lot of remote meetings, but like I say, first time I've done this kind of Q&A live and taking questions from people. So I'll do my best. And as you've already said, if I don't know the answers, we will take them away and try to get back to people with a substantive response after the event. So I've been in this role for just over a year. So it would have been a year ago last week. And it's been quite an interesting year. Obviously, we declared a climate emergency a few months before I took on the role. And we spent most of the first half of that year that I've been doing it engaging with the public. So we did the Big Leeds climate conversation over the summer months last year, taking in all of the big communal events that sadly we're not going to be able to have this summer. And taking the opportunity to speak to people, events from Leeds Pride to the Carnival, the Breeze events, so speaking to children, young people and families, and then speaking to tenants, organisations, community committees in the autumn, before we kind of drew that part of our engagement with the public to a close. We also last autumn had a citizens jury working with the Leeds Climate Commission. It was their jury, but we worked very closely with them. And again, really exciting opportunity to engage with a group of people who were selected to be representative of citizens of Leeds, and for them to have the opportunity to ask the experts in the subject, so from a different whole range of different fields, to hear from them about why climate change really is important and why we have to tackle it, and the range of different measures that we can actually take to make a difference here in Leeds, and the measures that we're going to be obviously seeking our government and internationally partners to take to be able to tackle it, because we can't do it on our own. Then at the end of last year, we were all set to pull all of that information together in a report to take to Executive Board in December, and of course with a general election which slightly delayed the publication of that report, and it came first week in January instead. And in the report in January, which was passed at Executive Board, we set out the plans to halve Leeds' carbon emissions by 2025. So we have an ambition to be carbon neutral by 2030. As a city, working with our partners to achieve that, because you can't do it only as a city council. We need citizens in Leeds to be engaged. We need their permission to take some of the actions we need to take. We also need businesses to work with us as well. So all of that's ongoing, but we have an ambition that's been set out in that report to have our emissions by 2025, and then we have probably the toughest stuff then to do from 2025 to 2030. So does that help? Yeah. Do you want me to say any more in terms of some of the areas?
If you're happy with that, Lisa, and you want to get into the questions, then we'll get into the questions. I think that probably pretty much sets the scene really, really well. Just while we go through these questions that have been sent in advance, please do comment with your questions in the live feed for me to pick out for the second half. So please do comment away, and as Lisa answers some of these questions, you'll probably see my head go back and forth as I'm picking the questions out for the next section. So we'll go to the first question. And the first question from someone saying, why don't we have a cycling czar in Leeds?
So I'm guessing people are thinking of Chris Boardman or Dame Sarah Story. So what we do have in Leeds is our cycling ambassador. So Brownlee, our gold medalist, Olympic gold medalist, and he's very supportive. He doesn't have quite the same time that he can commit as maybe Chris, who's obviously retired from competitive sports, but is keenly championing the work that we're doing. We do have, as a council, a cycling champion. So our colleague, Councillor Peter Cllr, is the council's cycling champion. So working alongside Alistair Brownlee as the city's active travel ambassador, doing probably more of the day-to-day work, working with me and our highways teams to ensure that cycling is right up there. And hopefully in the next few weeks, as we announce our next measures, we've been bringing forward schemes. You'll have seen the A65 scheme, pop-up cycle lane, which we're just waiting for the Walker ones, as they're called, to be delivered so we can put that in place. But we've got a number of other schemes that we're looking to introduce on other arterial routes in the city as well.
So the second question, there's a bit of a cycling theme here developing by the looks of it. Could the council insist on green riders on any new big residential or office buildings, which included things like commitments to build cycling lanes, lockers, or installing green spaces, green walls, etc.?
So one of the ambitions we've got as councillors in Leeds is to update our planning policies. So there's work taking place currently behind the scenes to make sure that that is as good as it can be. We already did some of that work through the decision we took last year in terms of the core strategy. So there is already an improved position in terms of making buildings more sustainable, but I think we can go further, and we're hoping to do exactly that. I know that colleagues who are councillors on the plans panels are really trying to hold applicants to account in terms of what they're doing for active travel and for sustainability of developments. So that's something that I know members are taking very keen interest in, and we've been doing training for plans panel members in particular in terms of what we can ask for and encouraging them to do that.
Okay, thank you. So the next question on a cycling theme, again, it seems to be the big thing at the moment. The perception of cyclists in Leeds is that Leeds cycle lane provision is only implemented when drivers aren't inconvenienced and road space threatened. When will that change?
So hopefully everybody will be aware that nationally as well as locally there is a drive now to ensure that there is much more support for cycling and for walking as well. And I think it's really important to mention walking because people forget that that also needs the priority that it hasn't had in the past. So we're looking to introduce more schemes that actually make it safer and easier to cycle on those arterial routes into the city. But importantly, as more people are going to continue to work from home certainly for the foreseeable future, that you can walk and cycle in your local neighbourhoods, and that children can safely walk, cycle or scoot to school. So this week we've seen the first 6 schools in the city, quite a good geographic spread, introducing school streets. And I know since we made that announcement last week, we've had a number of other schools and local councils contact us to say that they have schools in their area that are interested in taking part. So I think that was the initial wave, and I think we've got interest for certainly for the next wave, and hopefully as we kind of build on that and people experience what it can be like to get the next generation walking, cycling and scooting rather than being driven to school. And you and I and any other councillors listening will be very well aware of the level of complaints we get about parking at the start and end of the school day, which is a problem everywhere in the city. Local residents get fed up with people blocking their driveways as well, and their local air being polluted by cars sitting idling, which they've been told not to do outside school gates, but people always go, oh, I'm only there for 5 minutes or whatever. And it's not the best for the children who are being driven to school, because we know that the pollutants actually accumulate in a closed vehicle. They come in from the vehicle in front when you're sat in traffic. And we also know that for the longer term health of our citizens, that actually walking, cycling and being physically active are better for your physical and mental health and help to prevent long-term conditions from developing.
Thank you for that, Lisa. So the next question, with the loss in confidence in public transport due to COVID-19, particularly bus services, are there any plans to use park and ride to bring in Doris bikes in these places, which could be used to do cycle the last mile into work? Yeah,
so the idea of a park and ride, but riding on a bike rather than on a bus. We're having a few difficulties at the moment in terms of bike hire and how safe that would be, because obviously if you're sharing a bike, you're sharing the surfaces. So that's something we're having to very carefully look at the moment, because we were looking at plans for cycle hire schemes. Something we are wanting to look at with partners around the city are kind of recycle and reuse cycle schemes. So I know lots of people, me being one of them, have got their old bike out of the garage, dusted it down and started using it in the lockdown period. And I think there will be many people who maybe have a bike in the garage that they're not going to use, or maybe one that their kids have grown out of, that they might be willing to donate to be recycled and reused by other people. We've seen that bike sales have gone through the roof, and the waiting list now to get bikes. So I think that if we could certainly work with some of our third sector colleagues in the city, voluntary sector, we know that some of those already do recycling schemes for bikes, but if we could really encourage the public to work with us on that and make sure that the bikes that aren't being used, that are sat in garages, that other people would love to get their hands on and be able to make good use of, can be made available and brought up to standard, that would be fantastic.
Thank you very much for that. And if anyone's got any ideas about that, then obviously please do let us know, and we'll get those forwarded on to the right officers. So the next question, what plans are in place to get green walls and wildflowers into the cityscape? We could encourage participation by getting people to submit a design to a design competition.
So one of the things we've got on at the moment is the Regent Street Bridge, so the flyover, and one of the things we have built into that is plans for green walls. We've got inner city populations living right alongside that, so green walls there would be very welcome. We've seen in the city centre as well, City College new building on Quarry Hill. Hopefully people have seen that when they've been maybe getting off the bus station or visiting the market, has already got green walls on it, something we're very keen to see more of. And again, when we approved our high-rise building policy last year through the development plans panel, that was one of the things we asked to be added in terms of looking at more encouragement for developers, particularly for inner city schemes where there's less green space available, to look at green walls being added in as best practice.
Thank you for that. So the next question, hi, my question is that with all the COVID-19 restrictions within Leeds city centre, i.e. shops and business closures and continuing roadworks and improvement works, why are the air quality readings always around the 30 mark? The readings previously had been similar.
So, so I didn't quite catch the end of that, but we have seen an improvement in air quality in the city during lockdown, and some areas have seen more significant drop than others. I think one corridor that hasn't really seen the drop we would have hoped for was the Cllr Road corridor, where we're trying to improve the active travel provision. So I'm hoping that will help in the longer term as we can get more people cycling rather than driving through that route. It is one of the busiest arterial routes in the city and does get very congested. So most of the other areas we've seen significant improvements, and of course the worst affected area for quality, people probably know, is Neville Street and the Dark Arches in the city centre. And we already have plans in place which need other bits of the jigsaw to be completed for that to be closed to general traffic, just to be kept open for buses and cycles and pedestrians, which obviously, as we do that and then pedestrianise City Square, we'll see a huge improvement in that area. But that needs a few other bits of work to be completed to be able to do, and it's timetable for the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you for that. Will Leeds City Council, sorry, the next question, will Leeds City Council be taking the recent court case which stopped the expansion of Heathrow into consideration due to climate concerns when it considers the plans for the airport terminal?
Yeah, so been some interesting decisions up and down the country, Heathrow being one of them. The Heathrow one was actually an interesting decision because it was actually not to do with their climate emergency policy, but to do with a technical breach of a legal procedure. So not quite sure how helpful that would be in terms of decision making, but certainly the plans panel will be making their decisions in line with national planning policy, and obviously our own local decisions around climate emergency will be taken into account. But the Heathrow judgment, I think, need legal advice from somebody who's legally qualified to say how helpful that is, to be honest, in terms of informing that decision. But there have been decisions for Stansted and for Bristol as well in the last year. So there've been a number of high-profile planning applications relating to airports. One thing I will add is that I wrote to Grant Shapps, who's the Transport Minister, in November, I think it was November, might have been earlier last autumn, and asked him on behalf of Leeds City Council to take into account the carbon emissions of aviation into the National Carbon Reduction Strategy, because it's the national government that set the aviation targets, and clearly all of the airports are currently intent on expanding. We mentioned Stansted, Bristol and Heathrow there, but Manchester, just over the Pennines, is undergoing a huge expansion at the present time. So Leeds has got 4 million passengers a year. Manchester has something like 28 and is expanding to 50 million. So we need that decision making nationally, because even if we take decisions here on our own, that won't tackle the climate issue. It needs a national decision making in terms of aviation emissions.
Okay, thank you for that. We have lots of old single brick terrace houses in Leeds. What is the council doing to help make these more efficient? So
the council's been doing a number of schemes actually in the last few years. So we've had funding and have worked on streets in Cross Green and in Holbeck to treat 430 properties that were solid wall, that didn't have the cavity that, to be able to insulate it. And they've had external wall insulation added to them. it's been really not only really positive experience, I think, for those residents whose fuel bills have massively reduced, but also it's been a really useful experience for the council to inform what can be done and get an idea of the cost for doing that. We've written to government about that as well, to say this, with the investment from central government to enable us to do it at scale, could make a huge difference to the carbon emissions, because you wouldn't be losing all of that energy out from people's homes. It helps people on lower incomes because they're not having to pay for heat that's going straight out the walls as well. So you can actually benefit people in a number of ways. And for me, I think, if we're looking at the state of the economy nationally as a result of the coronavirus pandemic and the concerns we've all got around employment, this, I think, has a real opportunity for us in terms of being able to scale up home insulation. We've got thousands of private rented properties in the city, thousands of people who are living in back-to-backs, terraces that are really difficult to keep warm in the winter. And if we could get the government to work with us, we're also looking at crowdfunding as well as another option. But it gives us an opportunity to create jobs here in Leeds that would be part of a green recovery, and that would also, working with partners maybe in both in the building college, city college, getting skills and people trained up, maybe who have lost employment as a result of the pandemic, and giving them an opportunity to find an alternative and sustainable employment.
Thank you for that. I think this question is very much on the other side of the coin. What is Leeds doing to make developers make their homes more efficient?
So I think developers actually are better these days than they were in the past, is the first point. We have some really good examples, some in I'm sure I've seen your ward, is it Situ?
Yes.
I think it is, yeah. So we've got some really good examples in the city of developers who are doing some very exciting things in terms of making homes that really require very little heating at all, because they're so energy efficient. But we need to be doing that at scale and in a way that's affordable for everybody, because as beautiful as those homes are, they're not, frankly, within my price range, never mind many other people. So I think it would be great to be able to do that on a larger scale and in a more affordable way. And I know we've had a number of other developers who are interested. We've created a developers forum through Councillor Walshaw's Climate Emergency Committee. And the developers that are engaged with us there, of course, are the ones that want to be engaged with us. It's how we bring the big volume house builders on board with that. So it's great to have Situ and others who are keen to do those sorts of things. We need to get your Persimmons and others who are perhaps less keen on board.
No comment. Another question now. Many of us were annoyed the clean air zone didn't cover South Leeds. What is the council doing to improve local air quality?
So a number of things. First of all, the idea of the clean air zone obviously is to benefit everybody. So as a result of the clean air zone, which has been delayed again because of the pandemic, we know that lots of the bus companies have invested in cleaner buses, and on some of the most polluted routes we've already seen significant improvement because you're taking out dirty old diesel buses and putting in much cleaner buses. We've got the park and ride that's on its way, that's being developed at the moment in South Leeds, which will be the first green energy. So you've got solar power panels above the parking provision there, and you'll have buses that will be powered from those solar panels operating in an out of the city centre. So that will make a big improvement as well. And these vehicles as well are driving through our South Leeds streets. We've got the number of taxi private hire cars that have switched from older vehicles to cleaner vehicles so that they won't be hit by charges from the clean air zone as well. And we've been working with those drivers to be able to support them as well, to be able to make that shift with a range of different grants and support for them to be able to switch to greener vehicles. So all of that's happening. The council's own vehicle supply has been massively transformed. We've got the largest electric vehicle fleet in the country, and alongside all of that, then the work that we're trying to do to create an active travel environment, which is now stepping up at a pace. So in the next week, we're going to be speaking to all councillors about active travel neighbourhoods as well, and we're looking to create some of those in our inner city communities around the city centre, but it will include communities in inner south as well. And I hope that communities will work with us to achieve that, because it really will help to clean up local environments and cut out some of the rat running as well that our inner city communities really suffer from.
Okay, thank you for that. So the next question, there is so much unused grass space in Leeds, particularly around the road. What plans are there to do, as Councillor Ray would like, I did not submit this question, to rewild them?
So I've been getting lots of emails and social media messages about this, because obviously the grass cutting is kind of underway now. It actually doesn't fall under my portfolio, so I've had to ask Councillor Rafiq what we're doing in this regard. I have noticed myself just walking around the local parks and cycling to the local parks near me that there has been a lot more relaxed mowing in our parks this year, and areas that have been allowed to grow and kind of get, you know, the wildflowers stroke weeds that support our insect life and bees and pollinators that we want to see in terms of biodiversity. So there's been a lot more relaxed mowing in our parks, and I think the question really was probably more in relation to grass verges. So I know Councillor Rafiq has been speaking to the contractors that cut our verges and most of our park space as well. And I think they're trying to introduce relaxed mowing on areas where they've got high speed roads, so that kind of it's generally away from where there's housing, because they're trying to get that difficult balance between keeping local neighbourhoods looking well maintained and in line with what kind of local residents generally are asking for. Because I don't know if you have this, but where we've had in bloom groups that have planted daffodils in particular, they look fantastic when they're flowering, and then 2 months later when the grass has grown and you haven't been able to mow it down because of the daffodils still needing to regenerate kind of thing, then you end up with a bit of an unsightly mess. And we get complaints, certainly in my patch, where you have grass verges that are left with long grass because of daffodil bulb planting. So I think I think they're trying to look to do it where it's possible, and to build up a bit of public support in terms of routes that aren't directly next to houses, but not in terms of those outside people's homes. That's a really long-winded answer, but Councillor Rafiq might be able to give you a better one than that.
Maybe we need to invite him for the next guest Q&A. That invite will be going off in the post. Right. Oh, we'll email. So that's it for the questions that were sent to me in advance that Lisa has had a quick sight of. I did get 2 late ones, which I will include in the next section, which is basically the comment questions. So Lisa hasn't had a chance to see these questions unless she's been sneakily looking at the live feed while she's been talking. Nice. So, you know, we'll see. So, So again, with these, if we don't know the answers, because obviously Lisa's only just gained sight of these now, as it were, then obviously we'll come back with more substantive answers later. So no pressure to give overly detailed answers if you don't have the information to hand, Lisa. So the first one was, there are signs that we'll be working from home a lot more in future. How do you see that tying in with climate change, less cars on the road, but increased domestic energy consumption? Locally, would a reduction in ticket revenue from customers mean, what would a reduction in ticket revenue from customers mean for public transport in West Yorkshire?
Yeah, I think that was about at least three questions rolled into one. So first of all, what does working from home mean effectively for the climate? So, I mean, in this weather, clearly working from home, you haven't got your heating on, you're probably using a lot of electricity for remote meetings. And if you're homeschooling with the kids as well, they're all on electronic devices. So there's a massive spike in use of broadband and electricity. But I think if you think about the air quality in particular, then you've got a massive improvement in air quality. We've seen that evidenced through lockdown. So you're getting less carbon emissions from transport, and that was one of the biggest areas that was contributing to our carbon emissions as a city. Now, if we can do some work on those homes with the worst kind of energy ratings and really make a step change, which we'd need the investment for, and we're asking government to do that, to enable us to improve home energy efficiency, then that could make a big difference. Because if you're working from home in 5 months' time and it's really cold, you're going to have the heating on. So it would be good, wouldn't it, to be able to have that programme of work that could enable us to have a green recovery in terms of improving our environment and improving people's energy efficiency and cutting their fuel bills. Then in terms of public transport, it is a real concern. We've been, for the last few years, working very hard to make buses much more attractive in terms of reliability, clearing routes through for buses with improved bus lanes and bus gateways to make them much more efficient for bus users, in a bid to increase public transport use. Because again, we know that will massively reduce the carbon emissions of people who are currently sat one person in a private car on a morning and on an evening going to and from work. So the fact that we are in the current position is a real worry, actually. So we've got our bus companies working very hard at the moment to get as many people safely onto their vehicles as possible, and it's currently one person to every 4 seats. They're taking measures to keep them clean. There's no cash being handled, so it's contactless payments only, and making it as safe as possible for people to use. But clearly, the message from the government is don't use it unless you have to. And for those people who do have to, and we've got workers who really do need to use public transport, and we know that a third of people in Leeds don't have access to a car. It's a genuine worry, and not everybody, unfortunately, has the opportunity to work from home, and we do have many people who are having to go to other places to do their work, in most cases, those frontline workers that have had to work all the way throughout as well. So it's the people who, frankly, really need the support and recognition of all of us for what they've been doing for months.
Okay, thank you for that, Lisa. This one's probably a bit cross exec member as well, but still touches on it. So Cornwall is preparing a new climate change development plan document based on donor economics in order to reach its 2030 target. Is Leeds City Council doing the same, And are you in contact with anyone in the council in Cornwall? Also, what do you think the chances are of getting more powers from central government?
So in terms of getting more powers from central government, I think the only powers we're seeming to be getting from central government are if we, as we create a mayoral authority. So that'll be West Yorkshire wide, but those powers won't extend to planning. So there are proposals in there, but they have, each local authority has a right of veto over the planning ideas that a West Yorkshire Combined Authority might have. And the other, as a mayoral authority, the other thing to bear in mind is that we've been through a very difficult, painful process in terms of our own land development proposals. And I mean, I probably still bear the scars. It's been 7 or 8 years now of a very difficult process where we lost sites to developers that we've battled against, that the council refused, and that were then given planning permission on appeal. So we don't really want to be giving those powers away to anybody, and surely the idea of devolution is that powers are brought down from central government, not that local authorities give them up. So I'm not seeing any additional powers being handed down to local government at this present time in terms of planning. And again, you know, the sort of national stories at the moment, aren't there, in terms of decisions locally being overturned by national politicians, which again, as with some of the planning appeal decisions, as one in my ward that was overturned by the Secretary of State, which is currently being built out. So I think there's you know, not much hope on the horizon from what I've seen in terms of additional powers for us. In terms of looking at what other areas are doing, always welcome good ideas from other places. I'm not in contact with anybody in Cornwall, so if anybody wants to email me the details of that, feel free to do so. Quite happy to take good ideas from other places.
Thank you very much for that, Lisa. So we're going to move on to the ones that are pure online comments. So thank you to everybody that's been sending your questions in while Lisa's been giving those answers. Please do keep sending them, because if we do get through these a little bit sooner than we are planning, then obviously more questions the better. So the first one is, when are the charges coming into force? I'm assuming this is in. I'm sorry, when are changes coming into force, and what vehicles will be affected, as we know you need to regain losses from the pandemic? I think this is referring to the clean air zone, so I've got a feeling this is, when is the clean air zone likely to begin?
Okay, so the government moved the timescale for the clean air zone. So originally it should have come into place in January just gone, so January 2020. There were some issues with the charging infrastructure that on the government side, so there was a delay, and it was going to be happening this summer. Now, as a result of the pandemic, the government has asked us to delay, and we're looking probably turn of the year, when we're hoping that we can introduce it. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. The next question, why was Leeds 10 excluded from the clean air scheme?
So that predates my involvement, I'm afraid. So I wasn't involved in that decision at the time, and of course the whole of South Leeds was excluded, including my patch. So I'm also a South Leeds councillor, but a bit further out than you. So I don't really know the details of that, so to be able to answer you, I'm afraid.
So we'll add a note to that one and get a response back.
We did cover some of the other stuff in terms of the benefits of the scheme that is being introduced and how that should help all of our communities as well.
Absolutely. The next question, can the airport decision be delayed? COVID-19 measures are preventing our community groups meeting to gather and organise. I'm assuming this is in reference to the upcoming terminal decision.
Yeah, so there were some issues originally in terms of timescales for comments, and they have been extended. So off the top of my head, we'll have to send this out. I can't remember the dates been extended to, but because we couldn't go out and put the site notices up, you have 21 days from when they go up. And they went up just at the end, sometime last week. I can't remember which day exactly, but there's still 21 days from that date for comments to be accepted. Now, it is a complex planning application, and we're making sure that plans panel members have got an opportunity to get some independent technical advice in terms of the things that have been put forward in the planning application, because it covers things that, frankly, most plans panel members probably aren't used to digesting. The sort of level of technical details that have been submitted. So I wouldn't anticipate it being determined anytime soon. I think there is a good timescale ahead for those comments of people to be able to submit comments. And I've had advice from the Chief Planning Officer that even after the deadline 3 weeks from the site notices going up, that comments will continue to be accepted up until the point where it goes as a plans panel report.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is, when is the city centre becoming pedestrianised?
So that's a good question. Now, parts of the city centre have been pedestrianised for a very long time. So I'm sadly old enough to remember when Briggate wasn't pedestrianised. Don't laugh, Paul. And so we have over a period of 30 years seen more pedestrianisation taking place. So obviously Brigate's pedestrianised. We've got all of the areas in the Trinity, which is all pedestrianised. We've got growing areas of pedestrianisation, so Greek Street being pedestrianised as we speak, Cookridge Street very swiftly following after we complete the works on the hedgerow. And we've got plans then taking in the comments made earlier in terms of City Square as well. So we're building a greater pedestrianised area in the city centre. And I think partly because we have done this in kind of stages over many years, people maybe don't realise how much of it has already been pedestrianised, and hopefully people will see in the next few years a great improvement in both walking and cycling in the city centre. So if you look at the hedgerow at the moment, and it's still dug up, when that's finished, there will be a much better pedestrian environment there. We're adding pedestrianised areas around the Corn Exchange in the scheme that's due to start on site this summer. So there'll be improvements across the city in terms of the pedestrian environment and the cycling environment.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Lisa. So the next question is, in Leeds, there seems to be a focus in greening up North Leeds. However, it seems that South Leeds historically has been left behind. Why is that, and what are you going to do to improve green spaces in South Leeds? Excellent.
Well, do you know, South Leeds has probably, I'm trying to think whether it is, maybe not physically as big as Roundhay Park, but the biggest ancient woodland in the city. So at Middleton Park, which is often forgotten about. So we do have green spaces, not enough of them. Most of the green spaces in my ward in the South Leeds are agricultural land where people aren't allowed to use because it's there for farm use. So there are areas where we do need more green space, but I think the work that I was talking about earlier that we're going to be starting to consult local members on and wanted to publish very quickly thereafter around active travel neighbourhoods, we'll see improvements in greening, because if we can trial these now and they're successful, then that will enable us to close some streets to through traffic. That then creates opportunities for greening and for putting greenery into public spaces that are currently used for vehicles. So it's worked in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, if we can try it and get it to work here, I'm hoping that will really help us to make a difference in some of the areas where there's a lot less green space, where there's a lot of terraced and back-to-back houses.
Wow, I look forward to that email. Any chance, sorry, next question should I say, any chance we could partner up with people like Situ to act as advisors on new developments?
I think what we're trying to do through the developer forum is to get those partners to champion what they're doing and how it can be done, and done without, destroying their business model. Yeah. But also to put some peer pressure on the less environmentally friendly developers. So I think if we can champion the good developers and what they're achieving, that hopefully helps to put pressure on those that are not so good. Did that answer the question? I've forgotten what the question was.
Any chance we could partner up with people like Situ? I think it does, to be fair. So the next question: no, I can't even read now. What is the impact you think this will create for businesses and people that live in the city centre with limited access? With no access with clean air charge. I think it's in relation to the clean air zone again. That are, or when they come into force. Also, with the road closures and pedestrianisations you're planning. So I think it's, what do you think the impact on businesses and people will be with the clean air zone and the pedestrianisation of the city centre?
So what's the impact on businesses?
So what will be the impact on businesses and people in relation to the clean air zone and the pedestrianisation and road closures?
So it was on businesses and people travelling in, rather than residents in the city centre?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, for a start off, their air quality will be vastly improved. In terms of businesses, we've got Elland Road Park and Ride, we've got the Temple Green one, which is currently being used for the testing programme. But we've got both of them so well used that they've had to be expanded. And then we've got Sturton Park and Ride coming on stream as well. So actually being able to get in and out of the city if you're working in the city, and we're in a position for more people to get on public transport, then we have a growing alternative for people to drive that don't need to drive into the city. So we've also, as we said earlier, been working on improving cycle routes through the main arterial roads into the city, and we're going to be announcing more of that hopefully in the next week as well. So people still will be able to get out and about, and they will be able to move quite easily without having to rely on a private car. We still do have opportunities for people who have to use a vehicle. So there's going to be still parking spaces for blue badge parking in the city centre. There will still be access for those who, for whatever reason, are unable to drive themselves with disabilities, who can actually use taxis, private hires to get into the city centre as well. So there won't be any prevention of people being able to move around. And the idea, of course, is not to necessarily stop vehicles from being able to access the centre, but it's to discourage the most polluting vehicles from using the city centre and those areas within the clean air zone. So to get people to switch to cleaner vehicles, and like I say, for those who are employed as taxi, private hire car drivers, we've had a range of measures in place to support them to make that shift. And the bus companies have been using their own resources to shift from the polluting vehicles to cleaner vehicles as well.
Thank you for that, Lisa. The next question, will private vehicles be exempt from the clean air zone charges?
Yes, currently they will, yes.
Okay, nice and simple. Next question. Has Leeds changed its thoughts towards what it's possible to reduce our negative impact on the environment because of COVID? So I think this is, have we considered anything else in addition to what we were already planning because of the impact of the pandemic?
Yes, so we've already we've had to take immediate measures in terms of the city centre, and we've started to roll out to local centres in Morley, Chapelton, Armley, and somewhere else. Where was the other one? There was another one last week, Otley. So those areas have already seen pavement widening, just using barriers, water-filled barriers that effectively add space taken from the road and from parking spaces to enable people to safely pass and to queue at busy shopping areas. The next wave of those local centres will come out this week. So that's just immediate measures in terms of walking and enabling people to keep a safe social distance. This week, I think I already mentioned, we've got 6 of our schools in Leeds who started to operate a school streets initiative, which involves closing the roads immediately around. They're all primary schools at this stage, at the start and end of the school day, to encourage children to walk, scoot, cycle, and to feel safe doing so. So that's 2 of the measures that we've brought forward. And then the A65 pop-up cycle lane obviously got a lot of coverage when it was announced. We've got a number of other cycle lanes on arterial routes that we're hoping to announce in the next couple of weeks. We've got barriers on order, the Orca ones that are called for the cycle provision, which is a lot safer than just putting cones in the road, because you've got a higher level and much more robust barrier to protect cyclists. So we're hoping to be in a position to announce them quite soon as well. And then you've got that, plus a number of active travel neighbourhoods in that kind of donut around the city centre that we're looking to introduce. But I'd love to tell you where they are as well. But we do need to make sure local ward members are properly informed first. Sorry.
Indeed. Yeah. So the next question, can we have some car-free days?
Yeah, so we did have car-free days. We did 2 lots last year. In the autumn, we did some in your ward. Which unfortunately we had a really terrible day for it, and it rained. I think we might have had a bit more support for it if the weather had been better. Yeah. But you know, I think the families that came out and the children that were out on their bikes and scooters and skipping in the road didn't seem to be too put off by the terrible weather. So yes, that's something we will be looking at. But the way we've tended to do those types of things is we worked in Otley, Headingley and your ward last autumn to do that. We've tried to make it a bit of an event so that people can kind of really feel the benefit of having the road closed and being able to get children out playing together, getting neighbours to come out and talk to each other, etc. We've had music, we've had food stalls, we've had all sorts of information about the carbon reduction plans for the council and encouraging people to sign up in various different ways to reduce, reuse, recycle, to use more active forms of travel or public transport. So all those things that we've done in the past, I think we would have very much liked to have been doing some of that this summer. And as you know, all sorts of events have had to be cancelled this summer because of the need to maintain social distancing and for people not to be travelling unnecessarily. So that's definitely something we want to do, but probably not something we're going to be doing in the same way this year. But as I say, we're looking at maybe longer term closures in some of the areas we're trialling an active travel neighbourhood instead.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got about 5 minutes left and about 5 questions. So let's see if we can get a few of these in. Is Leeds City Council considering having less offices now we know that more staff are able to work from home?
So we have massively reduced the number of offices that we use already as part of our cost savings. So there's lots of offices that have basically been closed and sold. And what we have done is sent a hot desk. Now, the difficulty with hot desking, clearly, at the present time, is you don't want to be sharing your desk space with other people. But we do have a lot more people working from home. And I guess that's a question we'll have to look at in the longer term when we kind of get an idea of how long the virus is going to be continuing to circulate and how long we're going to be working, as we currently are, from home wherever possible.
Okay, thank you for that. On March the 29th, 2019, Leeds City Council declared a climate emergency with the pledge to achieve zero net carbon by 2030. I was there to witness it, so obviously someone there that watched. What percentage reduction has been achieved so far up until the start of lockdown?
I can't tell you what the percentage is. We may or may not be able to answer that question, but we can ask officers to give us a response.
And if we can get you a response, we'll make sure you get that comment.
I think there was in the report in January some detail, if I had it to hand, of the level of reduction by the time we had written the report in January, which isn't too far off. So we could probably lift it from that report, actually.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a look. Right, that one's a really specific piece of casework, which I'll deal with actually, so we'll ignore that one. Let's have a look. Following up on the clean air zone charges, why are we waiting until next year for it to come into effect, as we will have too much problems to face then as we would of left transition? I'm assuming that's with the lockdown, and having to learn new laws for, I think it's reflecting the European Union, leaving the European Union. So why, basically the question is, why are we waiting until the end of the year to bring the clean air zone into effect, bearing in mind some of our legal structure will be changing by the end of the year due to Brexit?
So in short, because the government have asked us to, because of the pandemic.
Short and sweet, we like that one. We've only got 2 minutes left. And final question, and then we'll wrap it up. How would it work with delivery drivers? Would we get unlimited access because of access times? Are there, as they are a pain at the moment? And where would we have to stop for delivery? So I think this is a question about the clean air zone again, and delivery drivers having access to do deliveries.
So it could be about the clean air zone, or it could be to do with things like travel neighbourhoods. There's a couple of things there. If it's to do with the clean air zone, then they would need to be switching to cleaner vehicles. We did do a trial for electric vans, working with businesses before lockdown. I'm hoping that's something when we come back out of lockdown that we can get back to doing. That was really, it basically gave businesses an opportunity to trial for free an electric van, rather than having to invest up front, but to try it and see how that works for them. So that might be something that the person who's written in is interested in following up. So if they want to email me, I can get the officers to send them details of that scheme, and when we're in a position to start that back up, we can let them know. Cool.
Well, I think we will call it quits then. You've answered 29 questions in the last 53 minutes or so, if you exclude the introduction. So I'd like to thank everyone that has tuned in to ask these questions. This video will be on my Facebook feed almost immediately after this live feed ends. I'd like to really thank Lisa so much for taking time out of her busy schedule to answer these questions. There were a few comments on there in the feed which we'll pick up on because there weren't new questions, so we'll come back to those separately. But again, thank you so much to everyone that's listening. I'll organise another guest Q&A very soon, and an absolute huge thanks to Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everyone has a good week, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for inviting me.